Author Nathan Hill, in his debut novel, The Knicks, said, "There used to be a difference between authentic music and sellout music. I'm talking about when I was young, in the 60s. Back then we knew there was a soullessness to the sellouts, and we wanted to be on the side of the artists. But now, being a sellout, well, it's an authentic thing. So now, listeners, the question you should be asking yourself is, how authentic are you?" Hello and welcome to the third season of Your Art Sucks, engaging stories about legendary artists and inspiring advice to help you make better art. And this is episode 2, Going Commercial, Feist and Caesars. In this episode, we will examine the effects of commercial success on an artist and their art. And when I say commercial, I mean this literally. The two artists in this episode were fortunate enough to have one of their songs prominently featured in a national television ad for the consumer electronics juggernaut, also known as Apple. This single act, as we will hear, had an immediate impact on the careers of these musicians. They were, as if in an instant, rocketed to the heights of popularity few artists ever realize. For many in the industry, this opportunity was akin to winning the lottery, and the spoils that came with it were almost as lucrative. But as with every fortunate event, there can be the unseen flip side, a side that, for those who are not prepared for the newfound recognition, could forever impact the artist both financially and emotionally. The truth is that while having a work of art being consumed by millions may be the pinnacle of an artist's career, it can also be the largest missed opportunity. The general public, as we will come to hear, are not the only interested parties when it comes to art appreciation. And by the end of this episode, you will hear how both Feist and Caesars use these commercials to push their careers forward. Now, just to be a bit of a tease, I can tell you that one of these artists were completely shameless when it came to profiting off their work. A complete sellout, if you will, but they were clearly ready and waiting for any door to open to take advantage of it. Who was that? Well, now you're just going to have to listen. So how about we get to it? Now, hindsight, it's a pretty interesting thing, especially when it comes to the impact of advertising. While some ads have an immediate impact, others take years, even decades to show their cultural significance. But it's not hyperbole to state that Apple commercials have pushed the bar to new heights. Not only have their product-based promotions been a hit with younger generations, causing the company to become a worldwide phenomenon it is today, the very name of the company has become lexicon. And further to this, the carefully selected music they use for their ads, well, it had an unprecedented recognition impact that had, previous to 2003, never occurred on such a scale. But let's not give Apple all the credit for their genius use of this medium. Some of you may be old enough to remember the 1971 Coca-Cola commercial that featured the jingle, "I'd like to buy the world a Coke," which was written by Bill Backer. This jingle is considered to be one of the most successful jingles ever written. In fact, when it was played on radio for product promotion in the 70s, radio listeners were so enthralled with the song, they began to request it, the way one would request an actual song. To them, the jingle went beyond the product and was, well, on its own, a very agreeable work of art. The jingle was so popular, Coke spent $250,000 creating a television commercial with hundreds of extras singing this jingle in the hilltops of Italy. The commercial was the most expensive ad ever produced to that date. And even with the tie-in to this sugary drink having worked its way into the national consciousness, it didn't stop Bill from re-recording this song. Now, he slightly adjusted the lyrics to say, "I'd like to teach the world to sing," and it actually reached number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts of the time. So as we have heard, the idea that a song placed with a product could become so loved that it ranked among some of the best music of the day, well, it's nothing new. In fact, That very Coke commercial changed the way advertisers thought about the influence of music on the acceptance of a product. The following decades were filled with campaigns that featured well crafted jingles and even popular music. The 80s and the 90s saw the emergence of many well crafted tunes that moved the needle past the days of the cheesy a cappella stomach remedy songs. In fact, jingles of this time were so smartly created, they purposely mirrored the music that was topping the charts. The thought was that the consumer already liked this type of music, so why not copy it and maybe drop a product name here and there in the lyrics? It was deceptively simple and yet successful. It became a problem for the advertising companies, though, as artists viewed this type of invasion as more than a tribute. They felt that such appropriation, well, it wasn't cool, and they decided to take action. Singers like Tom Waits sued the chip company Frito-Lay, and Bette Midler sued the Ford Motor Company. And that's when the light went off for advertisers. I mean, why try to copy their songs and potentially get sued when they can just make their own whole songs? Now, there were many artists who wanted nothing to do with having their music sell anything other than singles and albums. There was no way in hell that they would be a part of some cheap plastic gadget or some skin cream. But there were others who saw the potential windfall that could be had if the right song was married with the right product. And by the mid-90s, the stigma that a true artist would never sell out to corporate greed, well, it met its first big test, and it came from the electronic music artist, Moby. When Moby released the album Play, he decided to allow all 18 tracks to be licensed. The album had done, okay on the radio, but it was far from a hit. With some deft maneuvering, he was able to have his music placed in TV shows, movies, and even commercials. This act alone allowed this low-volume album to reach 10 million units in sales and make Moby pretty wealthy. Not only was his music everywhere, it was also spurring listeners to purchase other songs and albums of his that weren't licensed. It proved that the connection worked, and soon others were dipping their feet in the pool. Hell, even the Rolling Stones allowed Microsoft to use Start Me Up when they marketed Windows 95. But there was another event that happened that pushed some artists who were opposed to hawking products to seriously reconsider. And that event was Napster, that free file sharing service. You see, that platform crushed record sales, and it put many an artist into financial downward spirals. And to recoup their losses, they had to leverage new revenue sources. Hello ad agencies and welcome license agreements. Now let's skip forward to 2003, when Apple was ready to reveal their iconic MP3 player to the world. And to do this, they would look to music to feature heavily in the ad to help give the product a level of coolness amongst the target market. But the looming question was, well, which song would it be? Which artist would grace their latest venture? The fickle nature of the demographic wouldn't allow any misstep. Get it wrong, and you've lost the viewer. Get it really wrong, and you've potentially sealed the fate of the company. But, in true Steve Jobs fashion, the selection of the song Are You Gonna Be My Girl by the band Jet was an instant sensation. The black silhouetted figures energetically dancing against a background of day-glow colors was the perfect companion for a song so full of raw energy. In the eyes of many in the advertising world, the commercial was a game changer. But while the difficulty in creating a single successful ad was seemingly monumental, the odds of creating a follow-up, well, they were astronomical. The formula was obvious to everyone now, so a simple recreation of the original, well, that was out of the question. Apple and the ad company they hired, they would have to step up their game. It's now 2007, and Apple is getting ready to release the iPod Nano. With Jet selling 3.5 million copies of their song, there were countless well-known artists who were clamoring to be the next in line. But Apple wasn't interested in the established artists. No, they pulled jet from the other side of the world, and they blasted them into the homes of millions of American youth. And they, and the ad firm TBWA, Chiat Day, they were about to do it all again. Only this time, they would look a little bit north for their inspiration, and to a little-known Canadian singer who seemed to catch the ear of one of the gurus at TBWA. To say that in 2006, Leslie Feist was a household name in the U.S., let alone her own home country of Canada, well, that would be a stretch. But with a solid decade of playing her own music, with a number of bands, Feist was far from an overnight success. In 1991, when she was just 15, Feist and her punk band called Placebo. Now that's obviously not the same British band of, similar name. Well, her band won a local talent show in Calgary, Alberta. That allowed them to play the opening spot at a music festival that also featured the legendary Ramones. From these humble beginnings, Feist would set out to travel and work with a number of bands. In 1999, Feist moved to Toronto, and with a friend of a friend, Meryl Nisker, who then began to perform as the electro-punk magician Peaches, Feist worked the back of the stage at Peaches' shows. The two also toured together in England from 2000 to 2001, staying with Justine Frischmann of the Britpop sensation Elastica. Feist appeared as a guest vocalist on Peaches' song, The Teaches of Peaches. Now, I want to digress a bit here because I really want to bring some attention to Peaches. There are a large number of artists who know about Peaches and her insane talent, but you may not have had the opportunity to see her in action. Now, I get that she might be a little too edgy for some, but if you're interested in seeing someone command a crowd, I mean really pull them in with her raw energy, I urge you to watch the video I've linked in the show notes of this episode, which can be found at yourartsuckspodcast.com. Okay, let's get back to Feist. With years of travel and bands under her belt, Feist would eventually create her own music, which was released in 2001 and was titled Monarch, Lay Your Jeweled Head Down. This was followed up with Let It Die, which was kind of a reworking of an earlier set of songs called Red Demos. With Let It Die, Feist was gaining serious exposure in Canada as well as Europe. For this album, she won 2 Canadian Juno Music Awards for Best New Artist and Best Alternative Rock Album in 2004. Sales of Let It Die totaled 500,000 internationally, and she was awarded a platinum record in Canada, as well as a gold album in France. But with her next release titled The Reminder, all of that and her hard work and talent was about to explode into the mainstream. Now, as I mentioned, 2007 was about to see the release of Apple's iPod Nano, and the commercial for this campaign was already in the works. The only thing it lacked was that hand-picked track to complement the slick device. Now, I would love to tell you how the ad company found Feist's track titled 1234, and that was from her album Let It Die. But to tell you the truth, I don't know for sure. What is known is that the ad agency was known to scour blog posts for unknown acts and music that had yet to hit the U.S. market in a substantial way. Now, it goes without saying that if there was a unknown talented artist who had that it factor, well, this ad company, they wanted to be the ones to bring them into the big time. So when 1234 hit their radar and they paired it with a digital device, something clicked. So here it was that Feist found herself shooting a commercial in a brightly colored blue outfit, surrounded by colorful dancers who gracefully moved about her. 1234 was playing over and over again as the camera captured a multitude of angles. And when it was all said and done, and she was completely exhausted from dancing and mouthing her lyrics at least 100 times, the commercial was ready for the American public. In mid-September, the ad splashed its way across millions of televisions. And needless to say, Apple had another success on their hands. And Feist? Well, she began to reap the rewards of being part of the behemoth that was Apple. And in very little time, Feist was in the media. She was doing television interviews, late-night talk shows, and her face was placed squarely on multiple magazine covers. But in her own words, she was far from prepared for the response. She said, "I was a little naive as to the impact it would have, because I really didn't have any idea it would be like that. But it did me nothing but favors, because I've continued doing what I do, but with so many new open ears from so many more people than there were before." And she further added this, "I felt a definite shift after the advert came out. It seemed to pique a lot of curiosity, which luckily led back to an album and video I believe in. It just shows you the power of that kind of thing, as opposed to some preconceived marketing ploy." But while the immediate impact was positive, Feist did begin to conceive that such popularity may have some negativity. With her well-heeled knowledge in the industry, she saw potential for the single to be a one-song spiral. She said, "I thought, in a way, it's my worst nightmare, to have people at the concert twiddling their thumbs in front of me, waiting for that one song they recognize." But any of those fears were quickly assuaged when I realized that it would only happen if I stopped dead in my tracks and didn't do other things in my life. Now, with over a decade past since that ad played, we know that Feist wasn't hamstrung by licensing her art. Yeah, the song sold over 1 million units. And yes, the song charted in US and Canada and Europe and Australia. And yes, she rode the wave of success, all the way from its peak to its eventual return to the shore. And yeah, her sales after Let It Die, well, they haven't exceeded the numbers during the commercial's run. But Feist continues to be a successful artist, with or without license agreements. And in her own words, she would never change what happened. For her, it was a positive exercise. But we have to ask ourselves, even with the success of 1, 2, 3, 4, did Feist really capitalize on the movement? Did she fully embrace the momentum generated by licensing her art? I mean, the opportunity she was provided was one that, well, it remains extremely rare for the vast majority of musicians. And let's be honest, Apple isn't going to call on her a second time. If there's one thing we know about that company, when it comes to its music, they just don't repeat themselves. So you may be asking, what else could she have done? What other opportunities were available to her? And, well, the bigger question here is, what would it have done for her career? For possible answers to this, we have to look at a band that was also featured on an Apple commercial. Now, in 2002, a relatively unknown band, well, unknown outside of their home country of Sweden, they released their third album titled Love for the Streets. The Caesars, also known as Caesar's Palace or the 12 Caesars, they held no protectionist views of their creations. In fact, their art was a simple means to fund their process to create more art. Yeah, it was music, and as such, it did have the goal of finding an audience who enjoyed it for its original purpose. But unlike most musicians of the time, Caesars weren't limited to the sale of physical copies or tickets or merchandise from public performances. They knew that there were other options for music. The only issue facing them was that, well, they were a small band from Sweden, and they really didn't have too many opportunities. But as with Feist and Jet, Apple would somehow find Love for the Streets and would work their way through the first 5 tracks to end up at track number 6, titled Jerk It Out. By the time Apple had decided to work with Caesars, it had been 3 years since the album came out, and in that time, the electronics company had been releasing commercial after commercial. In fact, just the year prior, the first use of the highly recognizable Silhouette Dancer ad played in regular rotation, accompanied by the track Hey Mama by the Black Eyed Peas. And it goes without saying that the spot was very popular with teens and young adults. Well, they were the demographic Apple spent millions of dollars catering to. The difference was the Black Eyed Peas, they were already well known in the US at the time of the campaign. So Apple didn't only monetize on music that was niche, it also showed it could kind of mix it up and include in its playlist a popular party track of the day. When it came time for Apple to churn out the next colorful blast of promotional propaganda, the high-stakes game of musical chairs continued. 2005's commercial, which would be the second silhouette ad, well, that would be another nod to the original iPod and would showcase the organ-laced upbeat tempo of the Swedish rock band Caesars. Now, fortunately for them, their obvious talent shone through, and the unbroken streak of ad engagement continued. Jerk It Out was undoubtedly a hit, both inside and outside their home country. Charting in over a dozen countries, the band was elevated to a place where doors that were once shut to them, well, they were now wide open. Options were plentiful, and unlike Feist, who only leveraged traditional media, Caesars were waiting to take full advantage of every channel presented. And boy, there were a lot of them. How about we just listen to this list? Jerk It Out was also licensed for use by Bulgaria's largest mobile network, Mobiltel, and by Nivea Skincare Company, and by Coca-Cola in South Africa and Indonesia. But outside these obvious uses, the song also appeared in a newer medium that had been quietly gathering artists to its platform, the platform of video games. Caesar's song was licensed by Dance Dance Revolution, Supernova, FIFA Football 2004, Just Dance, Rock Band 3, Samba de Amigo, SSX3, and LMA Manager. And if that list wasn't long enough, Jerk It Out was also part of the soundtrack of many films, including The Benchwarmers, Captivity, Deuce Bigalow, European Gigolo, Fun with Dick and Jane, Yours, Mine, and Ours. It was featured in trailers for Night and Day, The Pink Panther, and Garfield Gets Real, while the remix of the song was used in the trailers for Clerks 2. As for further television appearances, it was included in the series Dawson's Creek, the HBO series Entourage, NCIS, and the British series Teachers. So now you see where I was getting at. Caesars were far from reserved when it came to using the leverage of popularity to make themselves quite wealthy off a single piece of art. And their licensing didn't end with that one song. Other songs in their catalog also made appearances in ads and movies and television shows. I mean, you have to admire an artist who knows what it takes to fully cash in. 19th century American folk hero Davy Crockett once said, "Fame is like a shaved pig with a greased tail, and it's only after it slipped through the hands of some thousands of people that some fellow, by mere chance, happens to hold on to it." Now, having said that, and having heard the stories of both Feist and Caesars, you may think, well, maybe Feist had it right, that Caesars were nothing more than used car salesmen. I mean, why would anyone license their work to every ad agency that extends a handful of money? Why put your credibility at risk as a serious artist, only to have your art associated with a cheap product or service? Now, while I completely understand that maybe authenticity and credibility may be more important to you, but for me, and I think for a lot of other people, those terms are extinct. They're outdated concepts that have more to do with propping up the artist's ego than they do with providing actual sustainability. Now, you think I'm wrong? Well, I can tell you that there isn't an artist alive today who doesn't want to create art full-time and fully support themselves doing it. Those that have managed to create a career for themselves, they've become masters of non-traditional sales channels. Now, to be honest, it wasn't that long ago when A-list actors used to secretly fly to Japan to shoot commercials for everyday products. In the days before the internet, such money grabs, well, they never found the light of day in North America. Actors could remain aloof without their secrets being revealed. The truth was, they would have been horrified if their serious talent was threatened by their toilet paper ad they were paid handsomely to hawk. But as we now know, today's actors have no qualms about selling everything from yogurt to life insurance without batting an eye. They've realized something you may not know. Maybe you just refuse to accept. Fame, fortune, and financial freedom are only dependent on the power of your ability to self-promote. Ask yourself this simple question. If you were suddenly provided a large audience to show your work, would you be able to turn that attention into sustained growth? Would you be able to take full advantage of the exposure with a well-thought-out plan to drive sales? Do you even have a plan? Or for that matter, do you even have any idea on what you would do if any media attention came your way? For those of you who are regular listeners, you'd recall the episode I did on Mark Kostabi. As we heard in that episode, he was a tireless self-promoter. He was a champion of his own cause. In his case, it was so extreme that he actually destroyed his own empire because he couldn't shut up. But you got to admire the stratospheric level of belief he had in himself. And from it, he was able to build a cult following in such an insanely short amount of time. For Mark, the plan was clear from the start. Create the story, sell the art. When the media came, he was so ready to use their machine for his own gains. He knew that to give them a spectacle, they would keep his name in the headlines. Now, am I telling you to be like Mark Kostabi? Well, no. That's a plan that's been played out. And the reality is there's already so many big names in almost every industry who are making millions using this very strategy. So I personally would stay away. The appetite, it's just not there anymore. Now, what am I saying then? Allow me to wrap up my thoughts and the thoughts of the experts I researched. They know a thing or two about promotion. To create a plan to capitalize when attention strikes, we all think you should do the following. First, manage the passive aggressives. Undoubtedly, this new attention lavished on you, it's going to irritate a lot of people. You're going to be the recipient of some pretty nasty comments. So, develop a thick skin and do your best to shrug them off. Do not become defensive or apologetic. Don't make statements like, well, I was just lucky. Know that you have talent and you deserve to be in the public's eye. So embrace this opportunity wholly, even if it does make you a little uncomfortable. Second rule, there's always a way. The likelihood of Apple coming for your art, well, it's pretty minute. I'm sorry to say that, but the odds are not good for any of us. But I can tell you, there are 1,000 channels that will promote you. Look to new or emerging areas that could use your art. Be open to any opportunity that may have a longer-term payoff rather than a quick attention grab. Many artists have gained an authentic audience just from supporting like a niche market. And when these markets go mainstream, and they always do, you'll always have more clout as you were an early adopter. And those that jump on later, they're never going to cut it. Third rule, find mentors. With media attention comes the ability to reach out to other artists who may not have known who you were just days prior. Leverage this opportunity to communicate to these artists, especially the ones you respect. Ask them for advice on how they sustain themselves. If you're honest and humble, you'll be able to come across in a way that possibly allows them to open up to you. Just think of the knowledge they can impart on you. Think of the wisdom that's there. Hell, even if they don't respond, you have to take the chance. Because even that one nugget of knowledge could really benefit you down the road. The last rule: money is hard to get, but boy, is it easy to lose. So whatever monies this attention has provided, be sure to put away a tidy sum to last you through the inevitable downturn. People today have such small attention spans, so your plan should include a solid investment strategy. Now do it right, and you can build a nice little nest egg for yourself that will allow you to keep making art for years to come. Do it wrong, and you'll probably be foreclosing on that giant mansion you purchased. So, there you have it. A full episode on the art of selling out, for better or for worse. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found it engaging and entertaining, and most importantly, I hope you found it useful to you and your art. Now, it may sound foolish talking about success when it feels like you're struggling, but the idea, it's kind of like buying insurance. It's far better that you have yourself covered, because when attention strikes, well, you won't crash and burn. All right, now stop listening to me and go shamelessly promote yourself. Remember that no matter what, I believe in you. Thanks.